The signal came in broken pieces and then it stopped completely. Fleet Commodore Elena Kessler stood on the bridge of the border station Meridian Watch and stared at the dead channel. Static hissed where a voice should have been. 30 seconds ago, Outpost 7 had been reporting routine sensor sweeps. Now there was nothing. "Run it again," she said. Ensign Tolley, barely 2 years out of the academy, tapped at his console with shaking fingers. "Same as before, ma'am. Signal cuts off mid-sentence. No distress code, no warning, just gone." Kessler folded her arms and studied the star map on the main screen. Outpost 7 sat on the far edge of human territory, a lonely refueling post with a skeleton crew of 6. It was the kind of place nothing ever happened to. That was what worried her. "Could be equipment failure," said Lieutenant Marsh, her second in command, though he didn't sound convinced. "Equipment failure doesn't cut off mid-word," Kessler said. "Get me a channel to Outpost 9, now." The wait felt longer than it was. When 9 finally answered, the voice on the other end was thin with fear. "Meridian Watch, this is Outpost 9. We have unidentified contacts at the edge of our sensor range. Repeat, unidentified." The channel went silent. Kessler felt the cold settle into her chest, the particular cold that came before a battle. "All stations, this is Commodore Kessler. Set condition 1. I want eyes on every outpost within 3 light years, and I want it 5 minutes ago." The bridge crew moved fast, but not fast enough. One by one, the outposts along the border blinked out like candles in a wind. 12, 9, 7, 4. Each one had been transmitting normally seconds before it stopped. No explosions, no debris fields, no warning shots, just silence. "This isn't a malfunction," Marsh said quietly. "This is a pattern." Kessler nodded. Whatever was moving through their border stations was doing it with terrifying precision, and it was moving toward Meridian Watch. 90 million kilometers away, aboard the Dominion flagship Vengeance of Stars, High Marshal Threxil Vore watched the same border collapse on his own screens, though from a very different point of view. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Vore was tall even by Vashrik standards, with pale gray skin marked by ceremonial scarring that traced 3 centuries of military victories across his arms and neck. He had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He had broken the will of empires older than this pitiful human colony cluster. And now, watching his forward scout squadrons erase one primitive outpost after another without losing a single ship, he felt nothing but boredom. "Report," he said. His tactical officer, a nervous younger Vazrik named Ches, bowed his head. "Marshal, all 12 forward outposts neutralized. 0 resistance. Human ship designs are primitive, slow acceleration curves, weak shielding, outdated weapon signatures. Our scan suggests their entire fleet could not withstand a single wave of our main assault group." As expected, Vore turned to the wide viewport, where his invasion fleet stretched out like a curtain of dark steel against the stars. 400 warships, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust in an afternoon. He had requested this campaign personally, over the objections of cautious commanders back home who worried about overextending Dominion resources. He intended to prove them wrong and to do it quickly. A fast, clean conquest of this human sector would silence his critics and secure him a seat on the Dominion's Grand Council. "Humans," he said, tasting the word like something faintly amusing. "A species barely out of its cradle, squatting on territory that belongs to those strong enough to hold it. This will be over within the week." Ches hesitated. "Marshal, our long-range scans of the human home cluster show anomalies. Several energy readings we cannot classify. Some resemble nothing in our database." "Sensor ghosts," Vore said dismissively. "Their instruments are crude. Proceed with the main advance." He did not notice the way Ches's hands tightened at his console. Aboard Meridian Watch, Kessler watched her screens with growing dread as the Dominion fleet came into full sensor range. The numbers scrolling past her display made her stomach turn. 400 capital ships. Her entire border command consisted of 11. Ma'am, Tolley said, voice cracking. Orders? Kessler thought of every drill, every simulation, every war game she had run in 15 years of service. None of them had prepared her for this. She thought, too, of the civilians on the 3 colony worlds behind her. Families who had no idea that an armada was bearing down on them. Evacuation protocols, all colonies, she said. Get every ship we have moving people out. Marsh, I want every combat vessel formed up between that fleet and the colonies. We are not winning this fight. We are buying time. Buying time for what? Marsh asked. Kessler didn't answer because she didn't know. High Command had never told her what exactly they were supposed to be protecting out here, only that this sector was not to fall under any circumstances, and that if she ever needed help, she was to broadcast a specific coded signal and wait. She had never used that signal before. She used it now. The Dominion fleet crossed the final threshold into human sensor range, and Vore gave the order to advance. 400 ships surged forward as one, an unstoppable wall of gray steel aimed directly at Meridian Watch and the 11 small ships trying to stand in its way. Kessler watched the tactical display and felt something close to despair. And then, in the space of a single heartbeat, half of the Dominion fleet simply vanished from her screen. Not destroyed, not retreating. Gone as if 200 warships had never existed at all. Report, she snapped. Tolley stared at his console, pale as a ghost. Ma'am, I don't. 206 enemy contacts have just disappeared from every sensor we have. No explosions, no debris, no emissions of any kind. They were there, and now they're not. On the vengeance of stars, Vore's satisfied smile finally cracked. He leaned toward the viewport, staring at the space where half his invasion force had been moments before, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were telling him. Chess, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Explain this to me. Explain this to me right now. Chess had no answer. No one on the bridge had an answer. 200 ships gone in an instant with no warning and no trace. Somewhere in the dark between the stars, something human was watching them, and it had just shown the Dominion, without firing a single shot, that everything they thought they understood about this conquest was wrong. 200 warships did not simply disappear. Somewhere, they were still out there, and Commodore Elena Kessler intended to find out where before they found her first. All stations, weapons hot, but hold fire, she ordered. I want passive scans only. Whatever took those ships, I don't want to give it a reason to notice us. The bridge of Meridian Watch was silent, except for the low hum of instruments and the ragged breathing of a crew that had just watched the impossible happen. Tolley's hands hovered over his console, afraid to touch anything. Then the screens lit up again. Not with new arrivals, with departures. One by one, the remaining 200 Dominion ships began winking out of existence on the sensor grid, exactly like the first wave, except this time, Kessler was watching it happen in real time. A destroyer near the edge of the formation simply stopped transmitting, then a cruiser, then 3 more ships in the same second. They're not being destroyed, Marsh said, staring at the readouts. There's no debris, no radiation spike, nothing. It's like someone is reaching out and switching them off. On the vengeance of stars, High Marshal Vore watched his fleet unravel and felt something he had not felt in 300 years of service. Fear. Identify the attacker, he snarled. I want a target lock. I want a weapon signature. I want something. Chess worked frantically at his station, sweat beading on his pale forehead. Marshal, there is no attacker. No enemy contacts detected on any sensor band. Whatever is doing this is invisible to us. Ships do not vanish on their own. No, Marshal, they don't. Vore forced himself to think clearly. An ambush, then. Some third party using cloaking technology far beyond Dominion capability, perhaps hiding among the human colonies and using this conflict to strike at both sides. It was the only explanation that made sense to him. Humans, with their primitive engines and outdated shielding, could not possibly be responsible for this. Pull the fleet back to a defensive formation, he ordered. Full sensor sweep, all bands, including ones we don't normally monitor. Someone is out there, and I will find them. Aboard Meridian Watch, Kessler received a hail on a frequency she didn't recognize. It wasn't Dominion. It wasn't standard human military either. She hesitated only a second before opening the channel. A voice came through, calm and steady, utterly unlike the panic filling her own bridge. "Commodore Kessler, pull your ships back, now." "Identify yourself," she said. The view screen flickered, and for just a moment she saw the shape of a vessel that didn't match anything in the fleet registry, sleek and dark, its hull seeming to bend the starlight around it rather than reflect it. A man appeared on screen, mid-30s, with tired eyes and a scar along his jaw. He wore no insignia she recognized. "Captain Reese Calder," he said. "That's all you need right now. Get your people clear of this system. There are things about to happen here that your ships were never built to survive." "That armada is bearing down on 3 colonies with 60,000 civilians," Kessler snapped. "I'm not pulling back." Calder's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened, just slightly. "I know. Trust me, Commodore. Help is already here. It's just not the kind you're used to." Before she could respond, his ship shimmered and vanished from her screen, the same way the Dominion vessels had, leaving her staring at empty space and more questions than answers. She didn't have time to dwell on it. A new alert blared across the bridge. "Ma'am, the Dominion flagship. It's been hit." Kessler turned to the main display in time to see the Vengeance of Stars rock violently, its shields flaring bright gold as something struck it from an angle no sensor could track. On Vor's own bridge, the impact threw crew members from their stations. Alarms screamed through the ship. "Report!" Vor bellowed, gripping the edge of his command chair as the deck shuddered beneath him. "Shield integrity down to 60%, Chess shouted over the noise. "Marshal that impact. It shouldn't have been possible. Our shields are rated to withstand direct orbital bombardment. Whatever hit us went through them like they weren't there." "From where? Show me the weapon signature." Chess stared at his console, his composure finally breaking. "Marshal, there is no weapon signature. There is no record of any energy discharge, any projectile, any beam. According to every instrument on this ship, nothing hit us at all. But the hull damage is real. The shield damage is real." Vor stood, his ceremonial scars catching the harsh emergency lighting, and for the first time since the invasion began, he felt the true weight of the situation settle over him. He had crushed a dozen civilizations with fleets less than half this size. He had never once faced an enemy his sensors could not even detect. "This is not possible," he whispered. Across the system, watching from the shadows of a moon's gravitational shadow, a formation of dark human vessels held position, invisible to every Dominion instrument. Aboard one of them, Reese Calder watched the crippled Dominion flagship struggle to stabilize itself and allowed himself a grim, humorless smile. "They still don't understand," he murmured to his weapons officer. "That wasn't even our real answer. That was a warning shot." "And if they don't take the warning?" the officer asked. Calder's smile faded. "Then we show them why nobody in this galaxy invades human space twice." Behind him, deep in the ship's hull, systems that had never been shown to another living species began to hum with quiet, patient power, waiting for the order that would end this war before it had truly begun, or turn it into something far worse than anyone, human or Vasrik, was prepared for. Fire rained down on the colony of New Harrow before the sun had even risen over its eastern hills. High Marshal Vor, humiliated by the losses at Meridian Watch, had ordered a change of strategy. If some hidden enemy was picking off his ships in open space, then he would take the fight to the ground, where numbers and firepower still meant something. Landing craft screamed through the atmosphere of New Harrow by the hundreds, disgorging Dominion soldiers into the colony's farmland and townships. Commodore Kessler was on the ground within the hour, coordinating the evacuation from a command post set up in the colony's transit hub. Around her, families ran with what belongings they could carry, children crying, the sky above lit orange with the glow of burning fields. "Ma'am, Transport 6 is loaded. That's the last of the Northern District," a young officer reported, breathless. "We've still got 2,000 people trapped near the southern checkpoint. Dominion ground forces are closing in fast." Kessler didn't hesitate. "Get every shuttle we have to the southern checkpoint. I don't care if they're rated for cargo, I want people on them." It was there, at the southern checkpoint, that she watched a young colonial pilot named Danny Ruiz make a choice that would stay with her for the rest of her life. His shuttle was the last one still flying, already over capacity, when a Dominion gunship locked onto the fleeing convoy below. Ruiz peeled away from the formation, drawing the gunship's fire onto himself, buying the other shuttles the seconds they needed to reach orbit. He didn't make it back. Kessler watched the flash on the horizon and forced herself to keep working, because there were still people who needed saving, and grief would have to wait. It was a lesson every soldier learned eventually, but it never got easier. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Dominion forces captured a wounded human soldier near the colony's perimeter, a grizzled sergeant named Okafor, who had stayed behind to cover a retreating squad. He was dragged before Vor himself, bleeding and exhausted. But when the marshal loomed over him expecting fear, he found something else instead. "You will tell me everything you know about the forces attacking my fleet," Vor said, "or you will suffer more than you can imagine." Okafor spat blood onto the deck and looked up at him with a tired, humorless smile. "You don't get it yet, do you? You didn't invade a nation, Marshal. You invaded a graveyard. Every stone out here has a name on it. Every colony you're burning has already buried people for less than this. You think you're the first ones who thought we'd be easy?" Vor struck him across the face hard enough to draw blood, but the soldier only laughed, a low, rattling sound. "Doesn't matter what you do to me," Okafor said. "It's already too late for you. You just don't know it yet." Vor ordered him thrown into a holding cell, unsettled despite himself, though he told his officers it was nothing but the ravings of a broken enemy soldier. Still, the words lingered in his mind long after he returned to his flagship. Far from the battle, in a hardened research facility buried beneath the surface of a world that did not appear on any Dominion star chart, Dr. Amara Osei watched the invasion unfold on a bank of monitors with an expression of grim calculation rather than fear. She was in her 50s, silver-streaked hair pulled back tightly, her eyes carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who had spent decades preparing for a day she'd hoped would never come. A technician approached her, tablet in hand. "Doctor, Commodore Kessler's forces are requesting reinforcement at New Harrow. Losses are mounting." Osei didn't look away from the screen. "Calder's group is already positioned to intervene once the Dominion ground assault reaches the tree line north of the colony. We hold until then." "And if they break through before that?" "They won't." Osei's voice was steady, but her hands, folded tightly in front of her, betrayed the tension she was working hard to hide. "Get me a secure channel to Calder's ship." Moments later, Reese Calder's face appeared on her private display, his features tight with the strain of overseeing his own hidden operation in the shadows above the battle. "They're getting close to the threshold," Osei said without preamble. "Authorize Phase 2. Calder's jaw tightened. "Phase 2 means we stop hiding. Once we do that, there's no going back to pretending we're just a rough colonial militia. They'll know." "They already suspect," Osei said. "Better they see the truth on our terms than stumble into it on theirs. Authorize it, Reese." There was a long pause before Calder nodded once, and the channel closed. High above New Harrow, aboard the Vengeance of Stars, alarms began shrieking through every deck of the ship at once. Chess nearly fell out of his chair, scrambling to make sense of the readings flooding his console. "Marshal, long-range sensors are picking up. I don't even know how to describe it. Something massive at the center of this system, buried in the gas giant's magnetic field. It's been there the entire time, completely dormant, completely undetectable until just now." Vor strode to the tactical display, his scarred face hardening as he studied the readout. Whatever the sensors were detecting, it dwarfed anything in his own fleet, dwarfed anything he had ever encountered in 3 centuries of conquest. "What is it?" he demanded. "A weapon? A station?" Chess's voice shook as he answered. "Marshal, I don't know what it is, but it's waking up. And whatever it is, it's been sitting undetected in the heart of this system this entire time, watching us the whole way in. On the bridge, every officer turned to stare at the display, at the vast shape stirring in the darkness at the edge of their sensors, and for the first time since the invasion began, High Marshal Threxel Vor felt the true, cold shape of dread settle over him, the growing certainty that he had led his fleet not into a conquest, but into a trap that had been waiting for centuries. Kessler had spent 15 years defending a border she thought she understood. In the space of a single briefing, she learned she had never understood it at all. She was escorted to Osei's underground facility by a silent honor guard, her boots echoing through corridors that shouldn't have existed, filled with equipment she didn't recognize and personnel who wore no rank insignia at all. Reese Calder was waiting for her in a briefing room lit by a single glowing star chart, alongside Dr. Osei, who looked older and more tired up close than she had on any screen. "You have questions," Osei said. "You've earned the right to some answers." "I have more than questions," Kessler said. "I have dead colonists and a fleet of ghosts that won't tell me who they're working for. Start talking." Osei gestured to the star chart, and the image shifted to show the very system New Harrow orbited, highlighting a massive structure buried deep within the gas giant at its heart. 40 years ago, a human survey team found this, a structure predating recorded civilization, built by a species that vanished so long ago, there's no trace of them left anywhere else in the galaxy. We call it the Threshold. "A weapon?" Kessler asked. "We don't fully know what it is," Calder said. "What we do know is that it's not dormant by accident. It was deliberately sealed. And whatever built it went to extraordinary lengths to make sure nobody found a way to open it again. So humanity decided to settle a colony right on top of it," Kessler said flatly. "Humanity decided someone had to guard it," Osei corrected, "before someone else found it first and opened it without understanding what they were unleashing. Every colony out here, every outpost, every patrol route you've ever flown, it was built around a single purpose. Keep this sector quiet. Keep the threshold hidden. Keep anyone from getting close enough to disturb it." Kessler felt the floor of her understanding shift beneath her. Every assignment, every drill, every seemingly pointless border patrol she had commanded for over a decade suddenly rearranged itself into a pattern she had never been allowed to see. "And Calder's ships? The ones that erased half a Dominion fleet without firing a shot anyone could detect? Built from what we learned studying the Threshold," Calder said. "Decades of work. Technology we don't fully understand ourselves. Reverse-engineered piece by piece, tested carefully, used sparingly. We've never shown it to an outside power before. Not until today." Before Kessler could respond, alarms blared through the facility. A technician burst into the room. "Dr. Osei, Captain Calder, the Dominion fleet is moving. They're not retreating, they're advancing on the Threshold's coordinates directly." Osei's face went pale. "Vor thinks it's a weapon he can seize. Then he's about to make the worst mistake of his life," Calder said, already moving for the door. High above New Harrow, Vor stood on the bridge of the Vengeance of Stars, staring at the massive readings pulsing from the heart of the system. His officers had urged caution. He had ignored them. Whatever this structure was, it clearly held power beyond anything the Dominion possessed, and he intended to claim it before the mysterious hidden human fleet could interfere again. "All ships converge on the anomaly," he ordered. "If the humans are hiding a weapon here, I will take it from them myself." "Marshal," Chess said carefully, "our scans of the structure are inconclusive. We don't know what will happen if we approach it directly." "Then we will find out," Vor snapped. The remaining Dominion fleet surged forward, 200 warships bearing down on the gas giant and the ancient structure buried within its churning clouds. As they closed the distance, the threshold itself began to stir, vast plates of alien material shifting and realigning along its surface, pulses of light rippling across it like something breathing after a long sleep. And then, around the Dominion fleet, space itself seemed to fold. Chess's console erupted with contact alerts, dozens, then hundreds, appearing out of nowhere in perfect formation around the Dominion ships. The vessels that decloaked were unlike anything the Dominion had faced before, sleek and dark, their hulls marked with a quiet confidence that needed no ornamentation to convey their power. "Marshal," Chess said, his voice barely a whisper, We're reading over 300 vessels, their size, their power output. On screen, Vor ordered, his throat suddenly dry. The image resolved, and every officer on the bridge went silent. At the center of the newly revealed formation was a single vessel so vast it dwarfed the vengeance of stars, the way a mountain dwarfed a pebble, its hull marked with lights like a small constellation, weapon systems along its flanks that made the rest of the Dominion fleet's arsenal look like children's toys. Vor's second-in-command, a veteran officer named Rail, who had served through a dozen campaigns, stared at the display with something close to horror in his voice. "Marshal," he whispered, "that's not a fleet." Vor turned to him, unable to look away from the impossible shape filling his viewport. "That's one ship." Alarm screamed across every deck of the Vengeance of Stars as the colossal human vessel finished decloaking, its shadow falling across the entire Dominion formation like an eclipse, and somewhere deep within it, weapons that had never been fired at another living species began, slowly and deliberately, to power on. The shadow of the great ship had not even finished falling across the Dominion fleet before the battle began. High Marshal Vor barely had time to shout an order before the first wave hit. Human weapons fire tore through Dominion shields as though they were paper, entire warships crumpling and going dark in seconds. There was no wasted motion in the attack, no chaos. Only precise and devastating efficiency, as if every strike had been planned decades in advance. "All ships, defensive formation!" Vor bellowed, gripping his command chair as the Vengeance of Stars rocked beneath a barrage that shouldn't have been possible. "Return fire. Focus everything on the central vessel." His gunners obeyed, unleashing everything the flagship had into the colossal human ship at the heart of the formation. The barrage struck home, and for one brief moment Vor allowed himself to hope. Then he watched, sick with disbelief, as the ship's shields absorbed the assault without so much as a flicker, the energy dispersing harmlessly across a barrier that seemed to bend the laws of physics themselves. Aboard that vessel, on a bridge lit with quiet, controlled purpose, Reese Calder watched the same exchange with a grim expression, his hands tight on the edge of his console. "Status on the containment field?" he asked. "Holding, but the Dominion assault is stressing the outer shell more than we anticipated," his weapons officer replied. "Captain, if they keep firing at this concentration, they could destabilize the threshold's outer seals without ever meaning to." Calder's jaw tightened. This was the danger Osei had warned him about from the beginning, that humanity's technology, built from studying something they didn't fully understand, was powerful enough to win a war, but unstable enough to cause a catastrophe in the process. Redirect 2 squadrons to physically block their firing lines on the threshold's flank. "I don't care about efficiency. I care about that seal holding. Captain, that puts our people directly in the crossfire." "I know." Calder's voice was quiet, but there was no hesitation in it. "Do it." The 2 squadrons peeled off and placed themselves directly between the Dominion barrage and the ancient structure. Absorbing fire meant for the threshold itself. Ships that had seemed untouchable moments before began taking real damage, hulls scorched, shields failing under concentrated assault. Calder watched 3 of his own vessels go dark in the space of a minute, and felt each loss like a physical blow. "We're losing the Ferris and the Callaway," his officer reported, voice tight. "Crews are abandoning ship." "Get rescue shuttles moving," Calder said. Now, it was a battle unlike anything Kessler had witnessed, watching the feeds from her command post on New Harrow with her fists clenched at her sides. Humanity was winning, that much was clear, but it was not the clean, effortless victory the size of that great ship had promised. People were dying on both sides of this fight, and for the first time, Kessler understood that whatever power humanity had built out here had cost more than anyone back home had ever been told. On the Vengeance of Stars, Vor watched his fleet disintegrate around him, ship after ship going dark, his officers reporting losses in numbers he hadn't suffered in 3 centuries of service combined. And yet, even as his mind screamed at him to retreat, some part of him needed to understand what he was fighting, needed to know what could possibly justify a species this primitive building, something this powerful. "Chess," he said, voice hoarse, Cross-reference every scan we've taken of that structure since we entered this system. I want to know what we're truly looking at." Chess worked frantically, hands flying across his console despite the ship shuddering under fire around him. Slowly, an image resolved on the display, ancient and vast, its architecture unlike anything in the Dominion's considerable archives. "Marshal," he said slowly, "the structure isn't outputting power in a way consistent with any weapon system I've ever seen. The energy signature is directional, but inward, not outward. It's not projecting force. It's containing something." Vor stared at the readout, the truth settling over him with cold, crushing weight. "Containing what?" Chess's voice shook as he answered. "I don't know, Marshal, but whatever it is, the readings suggest it's ancient beyond anything we have ever encountered, and unstable in ways that terrify even our own instruments. This isn't a weapon the humans built. This is something they've been holding back." Vor sank into his chair, the truth of his catastrophic miscalculation crashing over him all at once. He had led 400 ships into what he believed was an easy conquest of a primitive species, only to discover that the primitive species had spent decades quietly guarding one of the most dangerous secrets in the galaxy, willing to bleed and die to keep it sealed. The Dominion had never been a threat to humanity's plans here. If anything, his invasion had come dangerously close to becoming the catastrophe humanity had spent generations trying to prevent. Around him, his fleet continued to crumble. Ship after ship fell dark, and no order he gave could stop the bleeding. Within minutes, the once mighty invasion force had been reduced to a handful of crippled vessels, the vengeance of stars among them, hull breached in a dozen places, most of its weapons offline. A final volley from Calder's forces tore through the flagship's remaining shields, and the great ship shuddered to a halt, adrift and powerless in the dark. Vor was thrown from his chair, pain lancing through his side as he struck the deck, the taste of blood filling his mouth. When he looked up, a boarding party had already begun cutting through the ruined hull, human soldiers moving with quiet, disciplined efficiency through the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful ship in his fleet. Commodore Elena Kessler stepped through the breach herself, flanked by armed guards, her expression unreadable as she looked down at the broken remains of the man who had ordered the deaths of thousands on New Harrow. Vor tried to rise, but his body betrayed him, and he could only stare up at her from the deck, humiliation and disbelief warring in his ancient, scarred face. "You wanted to see what we're capable of," Kessler said quietly, kneeling so their eyes were level. "Congratulations, Marshal. Now you get to see what we're capable of protecting." Behind her, through the shattered viewport, the great human ship hung silent and watchful in the dark, and beyond it, the ancient structure at the heart of the system pulsed once, twice, and slowly began to settle back into stillness. Its secrets, for now, still safely hidden from a galaxy that had no idea how close it had just come to disaster. Vor woke in a holding cell with clean white walls, his wounds bandaged with a care he had not expected from an enemy he'd tried to conquer. He sat in silence for a long while, listening to the quiet hum of the facility around him, before the door slid open and Dr. Amara Ose stepped inside, alone, carrying nothing but a data tablet and an expression of weary patience. Behind her, Kessler and Calder waited in the corridor, watching through the open doorway. "You're not here to execute me," Vor said. It wasn't a question. Isn't a no, Ose said, taking a seat across from him. "You've earned some answers, Marshal, the same way Commodore Kessler earned hers. Whether you believe what I'm about to tell you is up to you, but I think, after everything you've seen, you already suspect most of it." She activated the tablet, and a projection filled the space between them, ancient and terrible, an image of the threshold's inner chambers that no outside power had ever been shown before. Millions of years ago, a civilization existed in this galaxy more advanced than anything either of our species has built, Ose said. "We don't know their name. We don't know why they vanished. What we do know is that near the end of their existence, they built something meant to end all resistance in a war we know almost nothing about. A weapon so far beyond anything else they had created that even they became afraid of it. Before they disappeared, they didn't destroy it. They couldn't. So they sealed it instead, as deeply and as carefully as they could, and hoped no one would ever find it again. And humanity found it, Vor said. 40 years ago, Osei confirmed, and we made a choice. We could have tried to study it fully, to unlock its secrets and use its power the way you assumed we had. Instead, we chose to become its guardians. We built our colonies around it as a shield. We trained our soldiers to defend a secret they were never fully told. We developed just enough of the technology surrounding it to protect this sector, and not one step further, because every test we ran taught us how easily this could go wrong. Vor was silent for a long moment, the weight of the truth settling over him fully for the first time. You could have used it, weaponized it, conquered 100 systems with power like that. We could have, Osei agreed. We didn't, because the moment you point something like that at another living being, you've already lost whatever you were trying to protect in the first place. Later, after Vor had been left to his thoughts, Kessler walked with Calder through the quiet halls of the facility, neither of them speaking for a long while. She thought of Danny Ruiz, the young pilot who had given his life over New Harrow, and of Sergeant Okafor, who was recovering in the medical bay after being freed from Dominion custody, still carrying the bruises from Vor's interrogation. "It doesn't feel like a victory," she said finally. "It isn't," Calder said. "Not really. We lost people today. Good people. That never gets easier, no matter how big the ship is or how much technology backs it up." They stopped at a viewport overlooking New Harrow's memorial gardens, freshly dug graves marked with simple white stones. Families gathered in quiet grief beneath a sky finally clear of smoke. Kessler thought about the years she had spent guarding a border she didn't understand, following orders without ever knowing what they truly protected, and felt something settle in her chest that was neither pride nor relief, but something quieter and more lasting, a sense of purpose finally given its full shape. "What happens to Vor?" she asked. "That's up to him," Calder said. "We're giving him a choice. Return to the Dominion and tell them exactly what happened here, the truth, all of it. Or stay silent and let his own people quietly erase him for failing so completely. Osei thinks the truth might do more good than another dead marshal ever could." 3 days later, Vor stood before Osei, Calder, and Kessler one final time, his ceremonial scars a stark reminder of a legacy built on conquests that had never once prepared him for what he found here. He had spent 3 centuries believing that strength alone determined who deserved to hold power in this galaxy. New Harrow had taught him otherwise. "I will tell them," he said quietly. "Every word. I don't expect them to believe me. I don't expect it to change anything back home. But they should know what's really out here, and what it means to challenge people who would rather bleed for something than misuse it." Kessler studied him for a long moment before nodding once, and Calder gave the order to release him to a Dominion escape pod, watching in silence as it disappeared into the dark toward whatever waited for Vor back among his own people. That evening, Kessler stood beside Osei and Calder at the edge of the gas giant's orbit, watching the threshold settle fully back into its ancient, dormant stillness, its pulsing light fading slowly until the structure was still and silent once more, exactly as it had been for 1,000,000 years before any of them were born. "We didn't win a war today," Osei said quietly, watching the last light fade from the structure's surface. "We just bought the galaxy a little more time." Kessler thought of Danny Ruiz's empty chair in the pilot's ready room, of Okafor's quiet defiance in the face of an enemy who thought fear alone could break him, of the graves in New Harrow's memorial gardens, and the families who would carry that loss for the rest of their lives. Humanity had not proven itself today through size or strength or the raw power of a ship large enough to eclipse a star. It had proven itself through the simple, exhausting truth of showing up, again and again, generation after generation, to guard something the rest of the galaxy didn't even know existed, asking for no glory and expecting no thanks. She looked out at the stars, at the quiet dark where the threshold slept, and understood finally and completely, exactly, what she had spent her whole career protecting. Somewhere out there, other eyes were surely watching, other empires wondering what had truly happened to the invasion fleet that vanished into human space and never returned. Let them wonder, she thought. Let them come if they dared. Humanity would still be here, quiet and watchful, standing between the galaxy and the dark, exactly as they always had been. Not because they wanted the burden, but because someone had to carry it, and they had never once considered putting it down.